The observation deck of the Velara hummed with the low thrum of engines as the ship drifted through the outer spiral. Mira stood by the viewport, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she watched distant stars blink through the nebula's crimson veil. She pulled her thermal blanket tighter around her shoulders, a simple thing woven from synthetic fibers and earth cotton, soft from years of use. The ship had picked up survivors 3 cycles ago. Not human survivors, never human survivors, not this far out. The Kael'van were a species the galaxy had written off as extinct. Fox-like in appearance with rust-colored fur and eyes that gleamed like polished amber, they had been hunted to near extinction by the Dominion, their homeworld glassed, their fleets scattered. What remained were fragments, a handful of adults and a dozen cubs all rescued from a dying frigate by Captain Chen's crew. Mira had volunteered to help with the cubs. The xenobiologists were overworked, and the Kael'van adults were too traumatized, too broken by loss to do much more than stare into the middle distance. So Mira sat with the cubs in the cargo bay that had been converted into temporary quarters, teaching them which food dispensers were safe, which corridors led where, how to read the ship's basic signage. They didn't speak Galactic Standard, not yet, but they understood kindness. It was during the 3rd night cycle that she noticed them shivering. The Velara's environmental systems were calibrated for human comfort. 22 degrees Celsius, 40% humidity, perfect for Mira, apparently frigid for creatures who had evolved under twin suns. She found Rune, the eldest cub, perhaps 8 standard years if she had to guess, curled in a corner with 3 smaller cubs huddled against him. His ears were pinned flat, his tail wrapped around the littlest one like a shield. When Mira approached, his amber eyes tracked her with the wary intelligence of something that had learned too young not to trust. "Hey," Mira said softly, crouching down. She pointed to herself. "Mira." Rune's ears twitched. He said nothing. Slowly, Mira unwrapped the blanket from her shoulders. It wasn't much, faded blue with white stars printed on it, a gift from her daughter before this posting. But it was warm. She held it out. Rune stared at her, then at the blanket, his small body rigid with confusion. Mira draped it over him and the other cubs, tucking it gently around their small forms. "They're better?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then the smallest cub, a little female with a torn ear, burrowed deeper into the fabric and a tiny rumbling purr filled the silence. Rune's eyes widened. He touched the blanket with one tentative paw, feeling the texture, testing the warmth. Then he looked up at Mira with something that might have been wonder. She smiled. "Keep it, I've got others," that was a lie. She didn't. But she'd sleep in her uniform jacket if she had to. By the next cycle, word had spread among the Kael'van cubs. Mira's blanket became the most treasured object in the cargo bay. The cubs took turns sleeping under it, and when they weren't using it, they folded it with a reverence that made Mira's chest ache. Rune appointed himself its guardian. He never let it touch the floor. He growled, a surprisingly deep sound for such a small creature, when other cubs got too rough near it. Once, when a human engineer accidentally stepped too close, Rune placed himself between the blanket and the man, ears flat, teeth bared. The engineer backed away slowly. Noted. Mira heard about it later and found Rune sitting beside the blanket, one paw resting on its corner, his gaze distant. "You don't have to protect it," she said gently, sitting down beside him. "It's just a blanket." Rune turned to her, and for the first time he spoke. Halting, broken Galactic Standard learned from the ship's language databases. "Not just blanket." His voice was soft, barely more than a whisper. "First gift after everything gone." Mira's throat tightened. "You gave." "You not take." Rune's paw pressed firmer against the fabric. "Dominion take. Always take. You give. You different." The weight of those words settled over her like a shroud. She thought of Earth, of humanity's own bloody history, of all the times her species had been the ones taking. But she also thought of moments like this, small and fragile, where one person's kindness could mean everything. "I'm sorry," Mira whispered, "for what happened to your people." Rune was silent for a long moment. Then, "Blanket warm, but you more warm." He leaned against her side, and Mira wrapped an arm around him, feeling his small body tremble. The other cubs watched from across the bay, their amber eyes gleaming in the dim light. When the Velara finally docked at New Haven Station, The Kelvin were transferred to a refugee ship bound for the sanctuary worlds. The adults shuffled aboard, hollow-eyed and silent. But the Cubs clutched small tokens they'd been given. Ration packs, data pads, standard-issue jackets. Except for Rune. Rune carried Mira's blanket, folded carefully in his arms like a banner. She tried to give him something else. "You'll need supplies?" "Keep supplies," Rune said firmly, his galactic standard better now after weeks of practice. "Need this reminder." "Of what?" Rune looked up at her, and there was something ancient in his young eyes. "That galaxy has monsters, but also has you." Mira knelt eye level with him. "You're going to be okay. Your people, your survivors." "We remember," Rune said solemnly. "Cubs remember. When we grow, we tell story. Human shared blanket. When galaxy cold, when everything lost. Human shared blanket." He stepped forward and touched his forehead to hers. A Kelvin gesture of deepest respect, she'd learned. Then he turned and followed his people onto the refugee ship. Years later, when humanity's borders were threatened by the Dominion's expansion, when Earth's fleets were outnumbered and outgunned, a strange thing happened. A fleet of unknown vessels appeared at the edge of the Sol system. The ships were small, cobbled together from salvage and hope, but they flew a banner no one recognized. A blue field with white stars and a single word in galactic standard. Rune. The Kelvin had returned. Grown now, armed now, ready. And at the forefront of their flagship, visible through every viewport, hung a faded blue blanket, preserved, protected, sacred. A human had shared her warmth when they had nothing. Now they would share their fury with anyone who threatened her people. Because the Cubs remembered, and the Cubs had grown teeth.